Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. It's Christine with gaugegirltraining, an online meal planning and coaching service. I'm a food scientist and chemical engineer, and in today's video, we're gonna answer the question, does running increase your cortisol levels? So let's get started. So the first thing we want to get into is what is cortisol to begin with. And cortisol is like your body's built-in alarm system. It's a hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands, and the adrenals are triangular shaped glands placed on top of the kidneys. So when we think of cortisol, we primarily think of its impact related to our body's stress. What this does is it's the body's main stress hormone. It works with certain parts of the brain that controls your mood, your levels of motivation, as well as your levels of fear. Now, the thing is, cortisol does so much more than just control stress. It also manages how your body uses carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. It keeps your inflammation levels down. It regulates your blood pressure. It increases your blood sugar, and it controls your sleep and waking cycle. So the reason why there is concern for cortisol levels being elevated is because we know that when cortisol is elevated, your body is in a state of stress, and that is a hormone imbalance. The reason why this topic has come up, it actually came up as a discussion in my Team Gauge Girl private accountability group, is because, as you guys know, I recommend running for endomorphs. And I recommend running as the main form of cardio for endomorphs because it is an excellent way to lose body fat. The problem is a high percentage of endomorphs also tend to have hormone imbalances, meaning they tend to have insulin resistance. Not all of them. The carb tolerance level does vary. There are endomorphs without hormonal issues, but there are a lot of them that do have them. And I would probably say the majority of endomorphs, at least 2/3 to closer to 80%, have some sort of underlying hormonal imbalance. So the question is, Christine, if you recommend running for endomorphs and we know that running increases cortisol, isn't that bad? Because isn't that going to stress out an endomorph even more and make their hormones even more out of whack? And I wanted to present a very sound, science-based answer to that question. According to the Journal of Endocrinological Investigation, it is well documented that there is a correlation between high-intensity exercise and circulating cortisol levels. In this article titled Exercise and Circulating Cortisol Levels, the Intensity Threshold Effect, there were participants who their cortisol levels were measured pre and post workout at 40%, 60%, and 80% of their VO2 max. So essentially, they're measuring cortisol levels before and after different levels of intensity of exercise. And I think it needs to be very clearly understood here at this point that any high intensity exercise that gets your heart rate to a certain level is going to have an increase in your cortisol level. And the thing that I want you guys to take away from this, and I'm going to have the link below for this specific study, is that there is a threshold effect, which means there is a certain level with respect to how intense your exercise is where there are diminishing returns, where it's not adding more value and it is going to increase the cortisol levels higher. And one contextual thing that is missing from this argument, where the concept of running increasing your cortisol levels, yes, that is scientifically proven. However, weight training stresses the body and damages the muscles. Cortisol, yes, it will temporarily stress the body, but what that does is it enables the body to adapt and get stronger. So having exercise in and of itself stress the body out isn't necessarily a bad thing. It becomes something that we need to pay closer attention to when we consider the threshold effect. So one of the most interesting things that came out of this study is the data stating the measurements of the cortisol levels after exercise. So there was a control where it was taken on a rest day, and the control cortisol levels were 6.6. Now, at 40% of your VO2 max, the cortisol level was 5.7, which is actually lower than the control. At 60% the VO2 max, the cortisol levels were at 39.9, and at 80%, it was at 83.1. So what you can see here, first of all, is that when you're training at 80% of your VO2 max, that's very, very intense training. Yes, your cortisol levels will go up. And the reality is intense training is important for adaptation, but let's be realistic here. If you're training at 80% of your VO2 max, that is equivalent to a runner training at a sub 6-minute mile pace. And as a former distance runner, most distance runners don't train at that pace. And I don't anticipate any of you guys watching this training at that level of intensity to invoke 80% of your VO2 max. Now, what this does indicate is that actually training at 40% of your VO2 max shows benefits in actually even lowering your cortisol level. So what I'm trying to get at here is, yes, there is a threshold where increasing your intensity will increase your cortisol. Not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing if you have added hormone imbalances, added stressors, added issues. But if you are healthy and you don't have any of those issues and you have, balanced hormones as far as you know, then proceed to train at a higher intensity level if you see value in that for performance-oriented goals. Now, for everybody here who is just trying to focus on fat loss, I would encourage you to train at 40% of your VO2 max, and there is a little bit of wiggle room for how much more you could train at, but the reality is, you guys, the vast majority of you are not going to come anywhere near 80% of your VO2 max. If you go for a jog or even a run, it's not going to stress your body to that state. So to answer the question of the video, does running increase cortisol? The answer is yes, running does increase cortisol. All exercise increases cortisol to a certain extent. However, it depends on the intensity with which you train, and there are certain targeted intensity levels like that of 40% of your VO2 max, as stated in the research study that I've cited below, that actually show that it can help lower your cortisol levels, and that's a good thing. So I'm actually going to be coming out with a metabolic resistance training protocol dialed in specifically to pair with my hormone reset plan, and that's going to be dropping on Black Friday. It will be available in home and gym, and it's going to have all of these research findings and thresholds and levels dialed in to support those of you who do have imbalanced hormones. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please comment your questions below, and I will see you in the next one.